I still remember the sound of that coffee cup hitting the floor. A sharp clink, followed by the gasp of an entire row of passengers. Everyone turned. The smell of hot espresso filled the air. And my wife, my calm, soft-spoken wife, was just sitting there, frozen in disbelief. A brown splash stained her cream-colored cardigan. Her hands trembled, not from the heat, but from pure shock. And standing over her was Karen. You know the type. Expensive sunglasses indoors, a half-finished latte in one hand, and a face that screamed entitlement. She snapped, "That's my seat. Window seat. I paid for it. Move." Now, I wasn't even supposed to be on that flight. It was supposed to be a quiet getaway for my wife, a short visit to see her sister before the baby arrived. But plans changed, and thank God they did. Because if I hadn't been there that morning, sitting 2 rows behind her, I don't know how far this woman would have gone. I'd booked the tickets myself. 2 first-class seats. Assigned. Confirmed. Paid. Window and aisle. And yet here we were, arguing with a stranger who decided the rules didn't apply to her. My wife tried to stay polite. She really did. "I'm sorry, ma'am," she said gently, "but this is my seat. You might be in 2B. Karen rolled her eyes. Then she actually leaned closer, whispering just loud enough for everyone around to hear. "Oh, please. People like you don't pay for seats like this. People like you." I could feel my pulse rise from 2 rows back. But my wife, always graceful, just smiled tightly and said, "Maybe there's been a mix-up. I'll call the attendant." That's when Karen lost it. She grabbed the coffee cup from her tray, muttered something under her breath, and threw it. Hot, bitter coffee splashed across my wife's chest, staining her clothes and the seat. The whole cabin went silent. My chair scraped the floor as I stood up. Before I even realized it, I was at her row. "What the hell is wrong with you?" I snapped. Karen's sunglasses slipped down her nose as she smirked. "Oh, look, the husband's here to save her. Maybe next time, book better seats." The flight attendant rushed in, clearly panicked, but Karen just folded her arms. She thought she was in control. She thought she could bully her way out of it like she probably did 100 times before. But this time she picked the wrong guy. I wasn't just another passenger. And this wasn't just another flight. The airline was mine. Or at least one of mine. See, what Karen didn't know, what most people never assume, is that the man sitting quietly in row 2A, wearing a hoodie and noise-canceling headphones, also happened to be the CEO of a private aviation group that operated 62 regional airports across 3 continents. But I didn't say that. Not yet. Because power is best used quietly. The flight attendant apologized profusely to my wife, offering napkins, towels, anything. Karen kept huffing. "This is ridiculous. She stole my seat. I'm calling corporate." "Ma'am," the attendant said, "please calm down." "Don't ma'am me," she snapped. "Do you even know who my husband is?" Oh, the irony. I was done listening. I took a deep breath and looked at her calmly. "All right," I said. "Let's check your boarding pass." Karen hesitated. I don't have to show you anything." I smiled faintly. "You just threw coffee on my wife." "You do now." She fumbled in her designer bag, pulled out a crumpled ticket, and shoved it toward me. "See? 2A window seat." I looked down. It said Flight 2187, Seat 2A. Except there was one small detail. The date was tomorrow. I looked back up at her slowly. "This is for tomorrow's flight." She blinked. "What? You're on the wrong flight," I said softly. "You shouldn't even be here." Her face drained of color. Passengers around us started murmuring. Phones were out, cameras recording. Karen's confidence started to crack. "Teach, that's impossible," she stammered. "I always take this flight." "Well," I said, "you took someone else's today." Security was called. But as they approached, Karen started screaming about how we were lying, how we must have switched tickets, how this was all some setup. The attendant whispered to me quietly, "Sir, should we?" I shook my head. "Let's handle it discreetly." But Karen didn't want discretion. She wanted attention. "You'll all be fired," she shouted. "I'll make sure of it. My husband is a lawyer, and I'll sue this airline into the ground." At that, I finally laughed. Not mockingly, just a short, tired laugh. Because this was beyond absurd now. And then I did something I hadn't planned on doing. I pulled out my phone, opened an app, and typed something. Within seconds, the lead flight supervisor appeared from the front of the cabin. He looked directly at me, nodded respectfully, and said, "Mr. Jameson, is there a problem here, sir?" Karen's jaw dropped. "Wait, you know him?" The supervisor smiled politely. "Ma'am, this gentleman is the—" "Don't," I interrupted. "Let's not make a scene." But the damage was already done. Karen's face went from angry red to pale white. Her lips parted slightly. She looked between me, the supervisor, and my wife, who was still trying to wipe coffee off her lap, and realized, finally, that she'd messed with someone she shouldn't have. I leaned forward just slightly. "Sit down," I said quietly. "Don't say another word." She obeyed. For the first time all morning, she sat down without another sound. The flight attendant helped clean the area, brought my wife a fresh blanket and a cup of water. I thanked her. Karen didn't say a thing. For a few minutes, the plane was silent again. Engines humming, passengers whispering behind their hands. But I wasn't angry anymore. I was disappointed, because this wasn't about coffee or a seat. It was about people who think status gives them permission to disrespect others. My wife looked at me, her eyes soft. "Please," she whispered, "don't make a big deal out of it." I smiled faintly. "I won't." But deep down, I already knew this wasn't over. Not yet. As the plane began to taxi, Karen suddenly started fidgeting again. She turned toward me, whispering nervously, "Look, I didn't know who you were. I'm sorry, okay. It was just a mistake." I didn't answer. I just looked at her, and then at the cabin crew, who were trying to pretend they weren't listening. "Don't apologize because of who I am," I said finally. "Apologize because of what you did." Her mouth opened then closed. She looked down. Good. The engines roared. We took off. The city fell away beneath us, replaced by clouds and light. My wife eventually leaned her head on my shoulder, eyes closed. I could still see faint stains of coffee on her cardigan, but she didn't seem to care anymore. Meanwhile, Karen sat rigidly in her seat, silent, pretending to scroll through her phone. But I noticed her hand was shaking, and maybe that was good. Maybe, for once, someone like her would finally learn what it feels like to be powerless. Halfway through the flight, the attendant came over quietly and said, "Sir, the captain wanted to confirm. Should we report this formally?" I thought for a moment. "No," I said. "Not yet," because I had a better idea. When we landed, I planned to make a few phone calls. Not to punish her, but to teach her a lesson in humility that she wouldn't forget. Maybe a note in the system. A permanent ban from first class. Maybe even a flag on her frequent flyer profile. But then something unexpected happened. As we approached landing, Karen started crying. Not loud, not dramatic, just quietly. Tears slipping behind those ridiculous sunglasses. And for a brief second, I felt sorry for her. Until she looked up and whispered, "You'll regret embarrassing me like that." There was again that entitlement, that inability to accept responsibility. And in that moment, I realized something important. People like Karen don't change. They just double down. The plane landed smoothly. Passengers began gathering their belongings. My wife stood up carefully, still trying to avoid making eye contact with Karen. But Karen didn't move. She just sat there, rigid, staring ahead. The flight attendants escorted us out first, offering apologies all the way. We stepped into the jet bridge, the warm airport air brushing against us. And just as I reached for my phone to call our driver, I saw something. Through the small oval window of the plane door, Karen was standing, talking animatedly to a man in a suit who'd boarded the aircraft. Her husband, maybe, or a lawyer, or someone else entirely. But whatever it was, her face was twisted in anger again. She pointed toward the door, toward me, and I knew this wasn't over. Because Karen wasn't just another entitled passenger. She was the kind of person who'd take things too far. And as much as I wanted to walk away, to let it go, a part of me knew that this story was just beginning. Because later that night, when my wife and I checked into our hotel, there was already an email waiting in my inbox. Subject line, "Passenger complaint filed against you, Flight 2187. My lips curved into a slow smile. She'd actually done it. Karen had filed a complaint against me. And that's when I decided, if she wanted to play games, I'd show her what it means to play on my field. Because while she thought she was dealing with just another man in business class, she was actually dealing with the owner of the skies she flew through. And the next time Karen tried to book a flight, she'd realize just how small her world really was. The email notification glowed on my phone screen. Subject line, passenger complaint filed against you. Flight 2187. For a few seconds, I just stared at it. Then I laughed softly under my breath. She really went through with it. Karen had thrown coffee at my wife, screamed at the crew, made a scene in front of half the cabin. And now she was playing the victim. Typical. My wife walked out of the hotel bathroom, towel drying her hair, and noticed my expression. What's wrong? I turned the phone toward her. She frowned, reading the subject line. Seriously? Yeah, I said. She filed a complaint. Her voice dropped. You're not actually in trouble, are you? I smiled faintly. No, not even close. But that didn't mean I wasn't furious. Because Karen's complaint wasn't just an inconvenience. It was a lie. And lies like that could destroy people who didn't have the power to fight back. I opened the email. It was long. Too long. She'd accused me of verbally threatening her, interfering with flight operations, and intimidating her through status. She even claimed I'd bribed the airline staff to cover up what she called physical aggression. I could almost hear her voice in the words. That same tone of entitlement. That same superiority she wore like a designer perfume. But this time, she'd crossed the line. My wife sat down beside me, quiet for a moment. Don't do anything rash, she whispered. It's not worth it. But it was worth it. Not because of the coffee. Not because of the insult. But because I'd seen too many people like her ruin the lives of good, honest workers with baseless complaints and fake tears. And I had the means to stop her. I opened my laptop. Within minutes, I was logged into the internal airline system, a place few people even knew existed outside the executive team. I searched her name, and there she was. Karen M., frequent flyer, platinum member, 5 prior complaint filings in the last 2 years. 5. Each one targeted a different employee. One flight attendant didn't smile enough. One gate agent didn't recognize her status. One manager refused her upgrade. Every single one had been dismissed after investigation. Every single one was a lie. But this time, she'd picked a fight with the wrong person. I typed a quick note in her profile, flagged for executive review, and attached the incident report from our flight. It wasn't about revenge. It was about accountability. Still, I wasn't satisfied. The next morning, I got a call from our corporate relations manager, Olivia. She sounded hesitant. Sir, I just wanted to verify. Did you personally get involved with a passenger issue on flight 2187? Yeah, I said. You'll see the report soon. I already have, she replied softly. The woman who filed the complaint. She's been calling nonstop. She demanded we suspend the flight crew. I sighed. Of course she did. Olivia hesitated again. She also said she's going to the media. That caught my attention. The media? Yes. She claimed she was harassed by a male executive abusing his power. She's threatening to leak the story to a local news channel. I closed my eyes and leaned back in my chair. Of course. Karen wasn't satisfied with playing the victim privately. She wanted an audience. But she had no idea what kind of storm she was walking into. By noon, screenshots of her social media posts started circulating. She'd written a long rant. Never fly with airline name. Their staff protect abusive passengers who think owning money gives them the right to humiliate others. The post had over 2,000 likes in an hour. People were sharing it, commenting, tagging news outlets. My PR team called again. Sir, do we respond? Not yet, I said quietly. Let her talk, because sometimes silence is the loudest move you can make. That evening, my wife and I had dinner at the hotel restaurant. She was quiet, thoughtful, stirring her tea. Finally, she said, Do you think this is going to get worse? It already is, I said. But don't worry. I'll handle it. And I meant it. Because I wasn't just defending myself. I was defending every pilot, every attendant, every gate agent who'd ever been humiliated by someone like Karen. The next day, I took an early flight back to headquarters. Olivia met me in the lobby, tablet in hand. Sir, the story's trending, she said. She did an interview this morning. Claims you threw her off the plane for no reason. I stopped walking. Interview? She nodded. A podcast. She's trying to build this narrative that you abused your power. She even hinted at taking legal action. I exhaled slowly. This woman was relentless. All right, I said. Let's see how far she wants to go. By that afternoon, our legal department had already compiled the in-flight reports, the security logs, and the surveillance footage from the gate area. It was all there, proof that she'd boarded the wrong flight, assaulted a passenger, and refused to cooperate with staff. The coffee, the yelling, everything. I could have released it publicly right then and there. One click, and the world would see the truth. But I didn't. Not yet. Because something about this still didn't sit right with me. I couldn't stop thinking about the way she'd looked at me before we landed. The tears, the trembling hands, and that whisper, "You'll regret embarrassing me like that." It wasn't just anger. It was desperation. There was more to this story, and I intended to find out what. So I made a few calls. One of our private investigators owed me a favor. I gave him Karen's name, her email, her flight history. Find out who she really is, I said. Everything. 3 days later, I got his report, and what I read made me sit back in silence. Karen wasn't just a random entitled passenger. She was the wife of a small-time lawyer, someone who'd made a name filing civil suits against corporations. And she wasn't just traveling alone that day. She was supposed to be meeting someone at her destination. A journalist who specialized in corporate scandals. My stomach sank as I pieced it together. The fake complaint, the immediate social posts, the interviews. This wasn't spontaneous outrage. This was planned. She'd targeted me, or rather, someone like me. And now, she'd gotten exactly what she wanted. Public attention, a story, a spotlight. I didn't tell my wife. Not yet. She'd been through enough already. But I knew what I had to do. The next morning, I drove out to one of our smaller airports, one of the 62 that bore my company's name. It was quiet, tucked in the countryside, far from the chaos of city terminals. Sometimes, when things got complicated, I came here to think. I stood by the runway, watching a private jet take off, slicing through the clouds. Freedom, control, perspective. And then my phone buzzed. It was Olivia again. "Sir, she's here." I frowned. "What do you mean?" "At headquarters." She showed up unannounced. "She's demanding a meeting with you." I almost laughed. "She came here." "Yes, sir. She says she won't leave until she speaks to you directly." Of course she did. Karen wasn't one to back down. "Keep her there," I said. "I'm on my way." By the time I arrived, she was waiting in the glass conference room. No sunglasses this time. Just her. Nervous, angry, and yet oddly calm. She looked up when I entered. For a moment, neither of us said anything. Then she smirked faintly. "You finally decided to face me." I closed the door behind me. "Karen," I said softly, "what exactly are you trying to achieve here?" Her smile didn't falter. "I'm holding you accountable," she said. "People like you think you can treat others however you want. I'm showing the world what happens when someone fights back. By lying," I asked quietly. Her expression hardened. "By telling my truth." I sighed. "Your truth involved throwing coffee at my wife." She looked away. "That was an accident." "No," I said, stepping closer. "It wasn't. You did it because you thought she didn't belong in that seat. Because you assumed she couldn't afford it. Because entitlement blinded you." Her eyes flashed with something. Anger, guilt, fear. I couldn't tell. "You think money makes you better than me," she said bitterly. "You hide behind your power. But people like me," I interrupted quietly. "People like you ruin lives with lies." For a moment, silence filled the room. The only sound was the hum of the air conditioner. Then she leaned forward slightly. "You think you can scare me? Go ahead. Use your power. Destroy me. But if you do, I promise, I'll make sure your name is dragged through every headline." I studied her face. She wasn't bluffing. She truly believed she was the hero of her own story. And, somehow, that made her even more dangerous. I took a slow breath. "I'm not going to destroy you, Karen," I said. "You're going to do that yourself." She frowned. "What does that mean?" I didn't answer. I simply slid a small folder across the table. Inside were screenshots, reports, and evidence, everything from a flight. The truth, printed in black and white. She stared at it, then back at me. Her lips parted slightly. This doesn't prove anything." "It proves everything," I said quietly. You can keep lying to yourself. But the moment you try to push this further, this goes public. And you'll lose everything you think you control. Her hand trembled. You wouldn't. I already have, I said softly. Her eyes widened. And for the first time since that day on the plane, she looked genuinely afraid. But before I could say anything else, my phone buzzed again. A message from Olivia. Sir, the reporter she spoke to just published the story. I froze. Karen saw my reaction and smiled faintly. Looks like I beat you to it. She stood up, adjusted her coat, and whispered, See you in court. And just like that, she walked out. I watched her leave, the click of her heels echoing down the marble hallway. For a moment, I didn't move. Then I opened the article. Front page. Headline, CEO accused of abusing airline power in first-class scandal. My name, my company, all there. It was out now. The world had its story. But what Karen didn't realize was that the truth had just begun to surface. Because within minutes, messages started flooding in. Not from strangers, but for people who knew her. Former co-workers, neighbors, even one of her husband's clients. All saying the same thing. She's lying. She's done this before. She manipulates people for attention. I sat back slowly, the weight of it settling in. The tide was turning. Not fast enough yet, but it was starting. And as I looked out the office window at the sunset over the runway, one thought crossed my mind. Karen thought this was over, but she had no idea what was coming next. Because the truth has wings. And soon, it was going to fly higher than she ever could. Be why the next morning, everything had changed. The story wasn't just trending, it had exploded. Thousands of comments, hundreds of shares, and more lies spreading by the hour. Some people believed her. Others defended me. But the truth was buried beneath the noise. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that headline again. CEO abuses airline power. My wife sat beside me in silence, scrolling through her phone. She looked at me and whispered, What are you going to do? I didn't answer right away, because I didn't want to react with anger. I wanted to respond with precision. So, I opened my laptop and started typing. No lawyers. No PRSPin. Just my own words. I wrote everything exactly as it happened. From the coffee, to her shouting, to the fake complaint. I attached the flight footage, timestamps, crew testimonies, and even the written apology she'd given the flight attendant hours before she filed her official complaint. Then, I sent it all, uncut, unfiltered, to one journalist I trusted. Not a corporate ally. Not someone I could control. Just a person who still believed in truth. And then I waited. The hours crawled by like days. Karen's story kept climbing. News outlets replayed her interview clips on loop. She looked calm, composed, almost fragile on camera. I was humiliated, she said tearfully. He used his influence to silence me. It was a performance, and the world was her stage. But I knew the curtain was about to fall. Late that evening, my phone buzzed again. It was Olivia. Sir, the journalist you sent everything to. She's publishing. I exhaled slowly. Good. An hour later, the new article went live. Title, Exclusive, the real story behind the airport coffee scandal. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't emotional. It was factual. Video proof. Witness statements. Timeline breakdowns. And by morning, the tide had shifted. The same people who believed Karen were now questioning her story. Comments flipped. Supporters turned silent. Screenshots of her past complaints started resurfacing. The truth had wings after all. When I arrived at the office, Olivia met me at the door, a faint smile on her face. You might want to see this, she said, handing me her tablet. It was a video taken that morning. Karen, leaving her home, surrounded by reporters. They shouted questions she couldn't answer. Her confident smile was gone. She looked pale, exhausted, overwhelmed. And then she said something that made the clip go viral. I didn't mean for it to go this far. Those words were everywhere. They were the beginning of the end for her. By noon, her lawyer had released a statement, apologizing, blaming miscommunication, claiming she'd been emotionally distressed and misunderstood. It was damage control, too little, too late. But for me, it wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about closure. So I told my team to drop the issue publicly. No lawsuits, no interviews, Just silence. Because sometimes silence is louder than victory. Still, something about it all lingered in me. That moment when she threw the coffee. The look in her eyes. The certainty that she could get away with it. I thought about how many people like her existed in the world, using entitlement like armor, hurting others, and calling it justice. I wasn't angry anymore. I was just disappointed. A week later, my wife and I boarded another flight. Same airline, same kind of plane, different energy. As we took our seats, a flight attendant recognized us. "Sir," she said softly, "I just wanted to thank you for standing up for us." Her words caught me off guard. I smiled gently. I didn't do anything special. She shook her head. "No, sir. You showed that sometimes the truth does win." That meant more to me than any article or apology ever could. The flight took off smoothly. Clouds rolled beneath us like soft waves. My wife leaned against my shoulder, whispering, "I'm glad it's over." "Me too," I said quietly. But deep down, I knew it wasn't entirely over. Because even though Karen's lies had crumbled, there were still people who'd never read the truth. Still strangers online who'd see my face and believe I was the villain. And that's the thing about stories. Once they're out there, you can't control who believes what. You can only keep living in a way that makes your truth louder than their lies. When we landed, the captain made an announcement. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for flying with us. We hope to see you again soon." The passengers applauded lightly. As I stood to grab my bag, I noticed a small news alert on my phone. Karen had officially resigned from her job. The same job where she'd filed complaints against co-workers for disrespect. Apparently, her company had launched an internal review and found patterns. I didn't feel joy, just a quiet sense of balance returning to the world. That night, sitting by the window of my office overlooking the runway lights, I thought about everything that had happened. The chaos, the headlines, the lies, and the truth that finally broke through. It all started because of a seat, a simple window seat. But sometimes, small things reveal who people really are. Entitlement, integrity, character. They all show up when no one's looking. My wife walked in, carrying 2 cups of coffee. She smiled as she handed me one. "Don't worry," she said playfully. "This one's not going to end up on your shirt." We both laughed quietly. It felt good to laugh again. She sat beside me, looking out at the planes taxiing on the runway. "Do you think she learned anything?" she asked. I took a sip of coffee, thinking for a moment. "Maybe," I said. Or maybe she'll just move on to her next target. But that's not our burden anymore." She nodded slowly. "I'm proud of you," she said. "You didn't stoop to her level." I looked at her and smiled. "Some fights aren't worth winning with noise," I said. "Sometimes dignity is the loudest victory." The night outside was calm. Jets came and went, their lights streaking across the sky. Each one carried stories of beginnings, of endings, of people trying to reach somewhere better. And in that quiet, I felt peace again. Not because Karen was gone, but because I'd finally let go. Somewhere out there, she was probably scrolling through comments, reading apologies, maybe even planning her next move. But I didn't care anymore. The world had moved on, and so had I. I leaned back, closed my eyes, and listened to the faint hum of engines in the distance. For the first time in weeks, I felt completely still. The truth had taken flight. And this time, it wasn't coming back down.